Good evening, everybody. I now make it 7 o'clock, so given that, we will move forward with this meeting. There is no fire alarm due, so if one does go off, please leave at the exit, both at the front or the side. Do not use the lifts, but use the stairs. I will be sliding down the banister, so just be careful. Thank you very much. Agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance.
We've received apologies from Claire Edwards, councillors Leanne Buckingham and Anoop Pandey.
Thank you. Members' declaration of interest on any matter on the agenda? No?
Chair, my daughter works at a school in Kettering on a SEND.
Don't know why I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Just.
I'm not going to shout.
Okay.
My daughter works in a school with children that have special needs, so I guess she's part of the SEND team.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Just picking that up. Notification of request to address the meeting. None. Minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2025. I hope you've all seen a copy of the minutes. Is it your... shall I sign these off as a true record of the meeting? Can I have a proposer and seconder? Councillor Mercer and Councillor Marks, thank you. We do have agenda item 5, and I'm going to move this around a little bit. If you don't mind, we have the Northamptonshire Children's Trust here to give us an update. So I'm going to pass over to them for their... before we move on to the KPI set. So, coming over to you.
Good evening. I'm Cornelia Andrekat. I'm Director of Children's Social Care in Northamptonshire Children's Trust. With me today is colleague Andrew Tagg, Director of Finance, and Sarah Reid, who's... Sarah, what is your title? Sorry.
So, Supporting Transformation Director for the Trust.
So,
Please could you talk into the microphones, otherwise we can't hear. Thank you.
So Sarah has been seconded from the West Council, specifically alongside our colleagues Matthew Prisk, who couldn't be here today, to support transformation activity.
I can't hear a word. Okay. I can't hear a word.
Sorry, is that better? Do I need to stay closer to the microphone? Yeah? Just checking that you could hear
me. Can you talk
sorry.
into the microphone like I'm doing? Because then we stand more chance of hearing it, I'm afraid. The microphones are unidirectional. If you're to one side,
okay,
you can't hear it. See when I talk there, but then you can hear it.
Please let me know if you cannot hear me, and I'll move closer. So I absolutely want you to hear me. We come here today to talk, to present to you a good story. So we started this journey of transformation 15 months ago. There was a joint endeavor from Children's Trust and the two councils, acknowledging the challenges and the ambition to achieve better outcomes for children and more effective services at the same time. You will see from the presentation that has been prepared for you that we have been able to achieve improvement to practice, outcomes, and also savings in a context of dealing with a history of challenges in terms of services, and at the same time in a context of national challenges that impact on what we aim to achieve for our children. As you would be aware, challenges in relation to increased demand, increased complexity. In relation to children, more families require more specialist support, and also challenges in relation to placements and placement costs that have been communicated nationally. What we have tried to do is to look into our services and look across the system to understand areas that could be better, and collectively approach those with clear plans for improvement. We have brought colleagues from other areas to support us to understand better what could be change. We have considered our context, and we have progressed with projects, specific projects that have demonstrated impact. The area is varied, starting with specific practice in children's trust to wider system issues, as you could see from the presentation. The Trust Board, the Transformation and Efficiencies Board, that has been functioning for the last 15 months, has representation, as I said, from Children's Trust at the most senior level, and also the 2 councils and also the Department for Education. So really, really positive story, and we'll go through some detail next, and then we'll welcome questions from you, an opportunity to go into areas that would be of interest to you. So pass on to my colleague Sarah Reid, who, as I said, has supported us with this endeavour.
Thank you, Cornelia. So I'm just going to be talking to the section about our collective improvement journey, which is getting to good. And I think for both councils, both West Council and North, we obviously aspire to get into a good rating, to also think about our future children's services and, working across both our 2 collective council areas as well, which would be a change as well. So before the 2 directors of children's services started, after the summertime, a lot of work was done with the trust and the 2 councils to say, well, as a system, what are all the things we need to get right and improve to help us get to good, which obviously does the right things and the right outcomes for children and young people, but it's also a way of making sure we get value for money as well from those things. So the presentation you have in front of you is really the different themes and some of the things that we need to be doing collectively. And these are the areas that will be part of the inspection by Ofsted that we expect probably the last quarter of 25-26. So that's really why we're trying to prepare for that and hopefully give you a bit of an update of how well we're doing and where there's still things to be developed. So one of the themes is about children who need help and protection. And you can see hopefully on the slide after that sort of experience, I've tried to give an update around where we've sought some improvement support from other councils, where there's really sort of excellent best practice, and also what we've done as a system. So if I just give an example around children who need help and protection, we've done some work with what's called a SLIP partner, which is Sector-Led Improvement Partner. So apologies for not doing all the acronyms before the meeting, and that will be a learning point that we'll take away anyway. And we've worked with North Yorkshire to really look at how does their front door work? How do calls come into the children's services? How do both councils help improve the early help offer? And how do we actually look in terms of protection as well? So as you can see, looking down the list on those slides, we've had support from Hertfordshire and North Yorkshire, and we've also done work with Lincolnshire as well. So I think it's really important to say that as a system, we've been very, very open to best practice learning and taking some of those things as well, which has been really, really helpful. And there's been some really good work done as well across all the different elements by both councils, particularly around early help and also around leaving care, including the housing offer, which has significantly improved in the last few months as well in terms of that. but actually working collectively on all the themes as well. What I would also want to say, though, is, as you can see going through the slides, there's a bit of an update against each element. We've done a lot as well as a system around our corporate parenting role as well. So Mark Riddell has been supporting both councils, and he's one of DFE advisors coming in and looking how that works. And there's also been some LGA improvement work as well, working with both corporate parenting boards. So again, as a system, quite a lot of improvement work's been going on around that. And what I would also say as well, one of the really helpful pieces of work that's happened from both councils has been the change in provision around legal services. So again, both councils now provide a really strong service to the Children's Trust, both looking after West children and young people and North children and young people. And again, to ensure quality assurance, we've worked with another council to provide that improvement support as well. So again, hopefully giving you assurance as a scrutiny committee that we're sort of making sure those things are in practice as well. I won't go through each slide, but one of the things I just wanted to talk about towards the end is there is an interrelationship between what we do with our children in care and also our children who are special educational needs as well. And I think it's really important that we just make sure that we're joining together the dots on these areas as well, and particularly those children who have those intersectionality between the requirements for children in need, children looked after, and also in terms of just having special educational needs as well. And that very much ties to our sort of corporate parenting role about making sure we really support our children and young people across there. And that has included the work also of adult services, looking at transitions as well. I think, so that's still a challenge for us, and we're both on our improvement journey. So again, during 25-26, there will be sort of reflection meetings, again coming in to then see our progress. So I think 25-26 will be a really, really busy year. So this sort of document sort of helps provide a bit of assurance and a bit of a roadmap for us. What we will be doing in the next couple of months, both councils and the Trust will be doing a very, very detailed line-by-line assessment against our Getting to Good document as well, taking the learning. So we will be also having a North already had their inspection of children leaving care already, and West will be having their inspection or their monitoring visit looking at children in care. So again, some of the learning from there will also build upon this and then support any other actions we will do. One of the things sort of to finish on though is that we are starting to also look at shadow budgets, looking at how much our placements cost, because both councils have slightly different issues. So if I give the example in the West, we have a lot more care leavers in the West. And one of the things we need to do more in the West is also to look at how do we have follow-on housing for children who want to have their own tenancies and actually improve that offer. But again, you know, there's stuff that we are doing across both councils to look at, have we got enough children's homes? What about young people? What about parents and babies? What about young people coming out of remand as well? So again, there's some really exciting collective work across both councils to help work with the Children's Trust around sufficiency. So hopefully that gives you a sort of a journey in terms of our Getting to Good. I'll pass over now to Andrew, if that's okay, and he'll talk you through some of the actual projects as well.
Thanks, Sarah. So just to update and really to just follow on from what Sarah has just touched on, we've got a number of projects and both councils have put a significant capital programme together that's detailed within the pack for the placement supply. And I think this is really important as we look at the sufficiency strategy to ensure that we've got local provision meeting local needs and we've got that right accommodation within both councils targeted at those needs. And Sarah just touched on earlier just around that sort of care leavers accommodation, and especially around sort of care leavers accommodation for post-18. And if we look at one of the real big pressure points, We've currently got over 120 care leavers at the moment, over 18. And then if we look at the track that's coming through, we've got another 84 young people that are currently 17 moving through. And these are our real big cohorts as we look at sort of demand. And we've put that in the slides. Some of the opportunities, because of some of the areas that we're spending significant amounts of money to the private sector and through the independent sector to deliver some of those projects. And just to really sort of pick up on that, we've had a number of successes this year. We've opened in partnership with the YMCA provision for post-18 accommodation with 13 places. That is now full. And the first element of the capital programme has seen a 2-bedroom home that's been delivered, with another one that's due to be delivered in April. And these are for some really, really complex young people. And putting that wraparound support as part of the strategic partnership with Homes to Inspire, that gives us a really good platform to change the dynamic, to move away from the reliance on the independent sector and some of the really big profit elements within that independent sector. Another couple of the areas that are sort of detailed in the slides are looking at how we collectively, and that's education, health and social care, look after the needs and promote the needs to ensure the placement that we provide meets the needs in the best way for that young person, to allow the adequate health support, to ensure that social care support is at the right level, and the education offer as well. And working fantastically in that area, really spearheaded by Charisse within the north and Melanie within the west, to really bring that partnership and ensuring the decisions that we do make are the right decisions for that young person, utilising where we can local provision, local schools, and working with those, because we're aware that the same pressures that sit within the care sector also sit within the high needs block of both councils. And the last area, just to sort of touch on, sorry, I've got 2 areas, is the fostering project. We're really keen to redefine our fostering offer, to really encourage more fosterers to come in. It's good outcomes for the young person. It's a significantly lower cost than the sort of the placement sector, but gives the best life chances for the young people. Obviously, not all young people can be fostered. The level of need that we are seeing coming through is at a significant level. But the market and the demand is incredibly volatile. And this is mirrored in both our MTFP and also in our monitoring, because one package change or one change could see an additional placement come at sort of between £10,000 and £19,000 per week. And that's why the local sufficiency. And then both councils really supported the trust 2 years ago around the Value in Care Circle to Success project, and that's about putting therapeutic support to hopefully step down young people that are in a placement or supported accommodation to an offer, stop young people coming into care with some of the prevention work. And I think this gives us a really good chance in both providing, and I don't like to use the term sort of value for money, but finding the best placements for the young people in our care in a really, really challenging market. And I can see the green shoots coming through just around the sort of the stability, and that partnership work through the transformation and efficiency is allowing us to tackle as a system the real collective issues that we are facing. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hope my voice holds up. 2 points. First, I think Mr. Tague has actually touched on both points. On section 3 of this document here, it repeats what Mr. Tague has said, that there has been a major problem with providing money for placements for private providers, sometimes £500,000, £750,000, £1 million officially for one child, which when we actually research and look into it, turns out to be buying properties. And I will actually use the language, I think some of these private providers have turned into property speculators. They're saying, oh, we have a mortgage, it's 3 years. That our current spending is this, and you're paying for it, which is the local taxpayers are paying for it. And they keep the property. And I'm very pleased indeed we're moving away from that system. And I only wish we could have moved away from it sooner and faster, and I think you agree. The other point is on post-18s. And as you know, this also affects not just children's social care, but adult social care, and the link between the two. There are some post-18s who cannot look after themselves. And sending them out into care in the community, which was very fashionable from the 1960s onwards. For some people it works wonderfully, and for some people it doesn't work at all. And we have a responsibility to these people who can't look after themselves. And it doesn't stop when they get to 18. That's absolutely true as well. It's a very difficult problem, but it needs to be tackled. Thank you.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Back in the 1970s, when I was involved in research into mental health and caring of people, care in the community, as mentioned by my colleague, was just coming in, and we nicknamed it No Care in the Community. I remember seeing people who were institutionalised, forced out, and in one particular case, someone drinking a bottle of bleach because they couldn't tell the difference between a bottle of bleach and a bottle of lemonade. Significant death rate amongst those people who were forced out as soon as they were outside the institution, because they had not been trained in how to live outside a supported environment. So I've got several questions. The first one is, how do we train people to transition from being in a fully supported environment to being in a semi-supported environment? Because that is key. We cannot provide £1 million a year or whatever it is to look after people for the next 50 years. It will not just bankrupt the council, it will bankrupt the country. So we have to find ways of reducing the care load by training people to be able to do a proportion of their own care, if you like. That's the first thing. The second, completely unrelated issue, concerns the recruitment of foster carers and prospective adopters. Now, in my experience, it's been difficult. Prospective adopters are quite often severely discouraged. I do know of people who were perfect for the role and who were basically blown away and told, sorry, we don't want you. In fact, we know quite a few cases. I don't know why this happens. I don't know what criteria are used that lead to people being blown away, but there seem to be, from my experience, far more people who are prepared to adopt or foster than ever end up on our lists. So I'd be interested to know why we end up with so many people discouraged and pushed away. So there's two separate issues there. Thank you.
Can I bring in David Watts, and then I'll bring in Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mercer, for the questions with regards to how we train people. I'll pick that up from an adult's perspective. We have a moving into adulthood programme that starts from the age of 15. So we start working with Children's Trust, but also with education providers to start assessing people's level of ability and planning that transition. We have a number of different ways that we will do that. So we've got therapists that work in adult social care, so occupational therapists. If people have got quite predominant physical needs, we have physios as well. And we also use a significant amount of assistive technology and equipment, working with providers to reduce down reliance on things like one-to-one care, 2-to-1 care, 3-to-1 care in some situations. It's those sorts of costs which drive care packages up from being, you know, £1,500, £2,000 per week up to £9,000, £10,000 per week. So we do have those programmes in place. I was updating the corporate leadership team today at our budget board about some of the successes that we've had in that. So on our targeted review activity and our high cost cases, we're on target to deliver £3.1 million of savings in year, and that's not by stopping people having services. It's about delivering those services in better ways, working with providers to skill them up and train them in different ways of supporting people.
Yes, Councillor Mercer.
Yeah, I'm aware of your enablement services. What I'm interested in is how broad they are and whether or not we can have a series of steps, if you like, where we have goals over a period of time so that individuals can be set targets for what level of enablement they will achieve over the next few years, and so we can actually measure how far we're progressing with it, because it's always wonderful to have an idea of what you're going to do and talking about it, but if it isn't measurable, we can't tell if we're actually making the sort of progress that we need to. So that's what I'm interested in, that area.
Yes, I've got 3 people.
So we have staff called progression workers who do that work with individuals. The 3.1 million was delivered across about 200 people's care packages. So we do track that, and we do track progress, and we're continuing to look for other opportunities to support people to be as independent as possible. Sometimes it's really practical things like supporting them to learn how to travel independently in the community, how to learn how to use public transport. Other times it's about things like safety in the home, and we can manage quite a lot of that with assistive technology. It doesn't always have to be about training people. If you've got the right sensors, then you can significantly reduce risks in people's homes as well. But yeah, we have progression workers whose sole job it is to work with people with complex needs, and over extended periods of time, sometimes 6 to 12 months, they will look at different ways of supporting people to become more independent.
Thank you. The second question I asked about recruitment of foster parents and adopters.
So
Sorry, Mark.
So just if I just follow on just from the children's perspective, just on what we're putting in place for care leavers, then I'll ask Cornelia to just respond on the fostering and adoption. So as part of the packages of support that we're offering, the examples that I gave earlier about the YMCA and Belinda Ferryson House provide that pathway and provide that support to have those life skills. And then we've got a big project called Keyways within our leaving care team, where we've supported that young person. It's called Keyways because out of it you then can have your own key when you've moved through your project. So when we say there's only 80 young people on the waiting list, those are young people that have been assessed as ready with the skills to go through that independent living, and then the care leavers and the staying put projects will really support those, so they aren't just in the sort of the community without that support, but we really assess those 16, 17-year-olds coming through Belinda Ferryson House and the YMCA with more intensive support to be able to step down that support at a later date as we continually work with these young people.
In terms of fostering and adoption, You are correct in relation to adopters. We do see less adopters nationally, so less people coming forward actually. There is very clear regulations in terms of what needs to be in place, for somebody to be an adopter or a foster carer, and there is a very rigorous assessment process because we want to make sure that children have the best care when they would be with those foster carers or adoptive parents. So it's basically in the law, so you have to follow that process and make sure that there is an opportunity to explore, motivation, conditions, and there is obviously police checks, health checks, and everything. It's in the law, so it has to be followed. Positively, we do quite well locally, both in relation to adopters and in relation to foster carers. We've also been able to find homes and adopters for family groups that nationally, actually, it's a bit of a challenge. That is an area that we want to do more, and that's why obviously it's part of our project, transformation and so on, looking at what we could put in place, to make it more attractive. We do analysis, we do surveys, talk to people to learn from what has worked for them and what could be better. So, and it's something that we could collectively, work with in terms of encouraging people to come forward, to explore, what this could look like. As you would be aware, obviously, in terms of foster carers, we also look at family as a potential arrangement for children, and we do see an increase in those arrangements where family members are providing homes for our children. So it's an area of ongoing focus, and absolutely trying to do, to put effort in that because it's something positive for children.
Sorry, David, I know you wanted to come back in there before we go to Councillor Roberts, and then I'll come back to you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably prudent of me just to mention about shared lives as well, which is often described as the adults' version of foster care. And we do have circumstances where there may have been young people who'd been fostered for 10, 12 years that still want to stay with their foster parents, and their foster parents want them to stay with them. So we have supported foster carers to become shared lives carers as that young person moves into adulthood as well, which provides continuity. We took the shared lives services, which had originally been hosted by West Northants. We took the North Northants shared lives carers back into our provider services within North Northamptonshire in April of last year, and we have managed to increase the number of shared lives carers that we have, not by a huge amount, and it's not as simple as just increasing the number of carers. You have to go through matching processes if they do not already have established relationships with those carers. But it is another opportunity for us to keep continuity in care and support for young people who've often been through quite traumatic upbringings.
And just to add to that, sorry, in terms of young people reaching the age of 18, so you mentioned shared lives, David, but also they could stay with their foster care. So we have what we call staying put. We also have staying close, where we find homes near to the residential home if they've been in residential. So it's all trying to be, creative in that space and offer stability and continuity for them, acknowledging, as mentioned, that, the support doesn't end at the age of 18, still needs to be there. If it was to be our children, we will continue to be around and support them. And we do have living care duties up to the age of 25, but it's collectively, thinking how we best support and enable that stability, as I said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Well, I've got something to say from my strategic helicopter, as it were, looking down over the years. It's been a few years now. I've been talking about a local strategic partnership. I too truly believe that we have to come together and work as partners. And there's information coming out, things that you're saying now, this team in front of us, that's starting to have a positive effect, and the outcomes of these young people is very important. They don't deserve to get anything other than the best. Putting on top of that, though, I've always said, you know, there is sometimes a lot more money than we imagine, and managing the budget is important as well, because one action in one area will have a positive effect somewhere else or a negative effect somewhere else. So it's vitally important that we control the budget. I'm not being glib when I say sometimes there's enough money in the pot, but it's in the wrong place. And I wouldn't shy away from saying value for money. I think they deserve nothing less. Certainly the people who pay the bills, as it were, need to be assured that there's going to be this two-part approach. The strategic partnership is coming together very nicely indeed. I'd like to see more budget progress, if I was really honest about it. Information coming through quicker and being done sooner. Talking about auditing. Anyway, thank you for that.
Councillor Mercer, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The recruitment of foster carers and adopters is something I'm very interested in, and I would like this committee or its successor in the future to do a review of the regulations and the process involved, because I've seen some very, very good foster carers and prospective adopters turned down without, in my opinion, a reasonable explanation as to why they were turned down. So I'd like to see a proper, open, transparent report on it at some point. But that's for the future, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. I think it just follows on from the tail end of Councillor Roberts' last point, if I understood it correctly. And this isn't a criticism, Chair, of the presentation or anything, but because transformation and efficiency is not necessarily a cost-saving driver or just about saving costs. But there is a lot to celebrate and a lot of work has gone on here, and there is a lot happening in relation to improving children's services. Obviously, we're in a trust situation. But this is corporate scrutiny, Chair, in relation to finance. And I think one of the things I can't get from this presentation, and again, that is not a criticism as such, but we've got a budget next week for Council where we're standing still in relation to the debt provision and the support this Council's given in relation to 3 million plus in relation to our budget for continuing support in relation to the Children's Trust. Now, obviously, one of the issues in the last 4 years is actually been trying to drive down that the debt that we inherited in relation to from the County Council, of course. So it's just some explanation or understanding on where, and it may be not the appropriate paper, because as I said, obviously transformation efficiency is not just about saving money, but costs are going up across the board. So that might be why one of the reasons why in relation to the financial figures aren't coming down, but in relation to the presentations, I'm still not getting a clear understanding of whether we're moving in the right place or not. And we're 4 years in, because the figures seem to be standing still. And as I said, that's not meant to count as a real criticism, because it's an understanding, obviously, that the economy's changed in the last 4 years. But there's a but, because at some point, you know, some people would like actually the children's services to come back into the council. At some point, we'd like to obviously that debt to disappear. So it's how we're driving that debt down. Now, whether, as I said twice already, this might be the wrong paper, but at some point, there needs to be an understanding of the direction of travel.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be really happy to provide an update. So just some of the key headlines to future scrutiny or through the normal budget process. It is a really demand and challenging area within the service. I think what we are seeing, we've seen a reduction of the number of looked after children. That trend is continuing to go down. We are seeing the development of some of that local provision now is starting to see the benefit of having cheaper placements. All the unit cost levels that we are seeing the unit cost level. We've got it here with supported accommodation, even allowing for inflation that's been built in there. We are seeing the unit costs of over 18s. We provide a detailed monthly report that goes into the various finance processes that gives a granular level focus on the changes of the individual placements, what the needs are, what the benchmarking analysis, how placements are changing. We've got a really big project at the moment that's ongoing around the reduction of agency staff, just from the position as at the 1st of April when we had 155 agency staff. We've now brought that below 120 with a target to bring that down to 100 for the 25-26 financial year. That's twofold, that an agency member of staff costs 20% more than the cost of a permanent employee, and also it is that sort of recognition and buy-in and within the organisation, and we're doing tireless work to change that sort of the agency percentage down to a lot lower. So there's a number of strands that are coming through. So when we compare ourselves with statistical neighbours, we haven't grown as much in that placement space, but we know that this is both a national and local pressure around the needs and the complexities. And sometimes as other areas shrink or other organisations sort of shrink in those, the Children's Trust or has the statutory duty to place that child. So that's why it's really important that all partners come together to have that the needs so we can look at that. But I'd be happy to provide any report with that granular level, just so you can see how that sort of the children care numbers have decreased from over 1,200 to, I think the figure this week was 1,149. I was going to say 43. So we are seeing those numbers of children in care. And if we look at the cohort of 16, 17 and 18-year-olds, those children were taken into care when the services were inadequate. Some of the decisions about those children moving into care, all the sort of the frameworks, all the support from Cornelia and the teams, all the therapeutic and the interventions aren't seeing that flow through, but it's really difficult to turn that tide in a short space of time. But I'd be happy to provide those statistics over a period of time, but it can be really challenging from the financial space, because we could reduce 7 young people and get those young people to be fostered. 2 residential high-cost placements would completely wipe out those savings. So from a financial lens, you may see the number going up, and we did do some work about what would have the figure been if there weren't some interventions. But I do think we are now at the cusp of sort of moving those, and if we can tackle the post-18 conversation, the 16, 17-year-old conversations, we could see that trend really moving forward. But I always have that spectre about having the statutory duty and one placement costing the significant levels that completely skews that argument. But whether it's the right forum tonight, whether that's a budget scrutiny, I'd be really happy to come back and go through the detailed monitoring report that I think runs to about 30 pages, that you can see that granular level, placement changes, what's happening in post-18, what's happening in placement costs.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mercer, you wanted to come back?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I was on the County Council at the time that that you're talking about, when the service was inadequate and a significant number of children were taken into care who perhaps didn't need to be taken into care. And once they're in care, you've got to look after them until they're an adult. Fully agree with that. and I'm impressed by your achievements in gradually reducing the number of children in care. But I've got a specific question. You've got the numbers going down because we're gradually coping with that cohort that came into care 10, 12 years ago when there was a large blob came in. But there is a second phenomenon going on, which is going in the opposite direction. The children who lost out because of lockdown during the early days of the COVID pandemic, when some of them were damaged by lack of emotional development because of the lockdown, some of those, that's going to mean that there's going to be children who will eventually end up in care or are coming into care because of their emotional lack of development during that period. Do you have any estimates of how many children that's going to be and when that bulge will reach its peak? In other words, when we will no longer be having children coming into care as a consequence of the lockdown?
Just to answer your question, we do indeed, see children that came into care, back in the days for a variety of reasons due to their needs not being met. They don't stay in care forever until they are 18, they reach the age of 18. We always revisit the family circumstances, the child circumstances, and we have a number of children return home with appropriate support in place. We also, if needs be, we go back to court, to discharge orders. So constantly, there is a number, that's coming in, but there is also, a number that goes out. What we try to do is make sure that we have the right children in care for the right amount of time. So that is our focus. We do see an impact of the pandemic in terms of how children present, increase in mental health, emotional well-being. We also see other challenges, around knife crime, county lines and so on, that actually are growing and impact on our children, and some needing to come into care because of that. The extent of challenges probably will take some time, to be understood. So we work closely with colleagues in health, with obviously education and so on, because that impacts, the entirety of the system that support children. And we all try to understand how we best approach that, to ensure that families have support, that they grow stronger, and are able to keep those children at home whenever possible. So it's a continuing effort. We also look and obviously do prediction, as Andrew has said, so looking at needs and possible trends and compare with other areas so that we have an understanding as to what this could look like, and also by targeting the right support, what we could actually decrease the level of need.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
I found that conversation really quite interesting, and I think we've covered some really important things tonight. There's very little that we do in life that's more important than some of these things that we're doing. And the outcomes are absolutely vital and front and centre of everything that we do. And I'd like to see quite a lot of stuff coming in-house, and I'd like to see us commit ourselves to building a couple of thousand council houses with some purpose behind it to solve some of these issues. But we do have to watch the money, because without that budget control, we're going to run out of it, and then goodness knows where we'll be. So I make no apologies for asking questions on the budget, but I also have to say again, there is that spring in the step of the team. The team's coming together and work is starting to flow. And you can feel it.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, please. So how are early help initiatives ensuring better prevention and reducing the needs for crisis intervention?
Okay, that's a really helpful question. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Chair. So we are looking at redeveloping our early help offer in Northamptonshire, and we're very much doing this based on what is the needs of our demography. So really understanding the complexity of need for our children and young people, but also understanding at a locality level what are some of the key presenting needs or some of the key characteristics of those needs. And the model that we are developing comes in 3 pillars, just to share it with colleagues. So we've obviously got our family hub networks, which we have started to see implementation. So we've delivered on 2 family hubs that are in Wellingborough and Kettering. And then we've got 2 further family hub networks that are due to come on stream towards the end of April. So we're looking at areas in Corby and North East Hants. What does that model deliver for children and young people? Well, it's going to deliver that wraparound care and support that we've all discussed today that's really vital and important. So it's offering that think family approach, so not just looking at the child, it's looking at the context of what the parents presenting characteristics of needs are. And the idea is that we are providing a multitude of solutions to support those families. And what we are looking at is having designated key workers, family hub practitioners, that are working through the hubs, that are able to deliver that flexible early help. So not just in the hub settings, but also outreach at home. And the idea is that that support will travel with families up to 12 months. Why is it 12-month support? Because we recognise that targeted early help has to move with the needs of families, and we know that often change can take time. So offering that flexibility of longer-term support is going to be vital. The second area, which is really crucial around early help, and we've seen some gaps in provision around this, is having early help at the front door of our school communities. Again, why is that a fundamental of importance? Because as we've recognised this evening, that if we're able to pick up the root causes of need very early, we know we're going to make a significant impact and difference. So having early help navigators based in our schools, we're able to early identify children, put that wraparound support in immediately, and we will see a reduction in the escalation going into children's social care. Because we know that early help at the early stage is going to make more of an impact. I guess the third element is the recognition around our young people. You know, I've had the great pleasure of travelling different parts of Northamptonshire, and one of the things that's a fundamental of importance to me is what does their life trajectory and journey look like at 7, but what does it look at 14, what does it look at 21? So the work that we will be doing with our young people is supporting them through those really critical transitions, providing that wraparound support so that they go on to have those kind of lifelong opportunities. So I guess in summary, what we're looking at rolling out is a very comprehensive early help model that's predicated and founded on a trauma-informed practice response, because a lot of our children and families do experience different forms of trauma, and we recognise that that's an important approach. But the second is we don't want to just deliver services for this generation. We want intergenerational outcomes so that we've got children, siblings that are growing up to make a difference, and also some of their families will make a challenge and difference. So those services are in development. We will be working really closely with the Trust, because there is an opportunity to think about those families stepping down. We don't want them stepping up again. And also those families that we can support at that really early stage. And we're looking at some of those services coming on stream in May. So we're incredibly excited about this fantastic opportunity to really work closer with our local communities, have our children and families part of the co-design, and we will start to see a significant impact and difference for what our children and young people deserve in Northamptonshire. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. As a supplementary, notice that the budget for that work that's sort of come back from the Trust doesn't appear to me to be sufficient to do what you want to do. Are there any challenges around that?
I think that you know, when we're thinking about the work that I'm looking at, which is essentially around early help, for me, it's thinking about it twofold. So I'm reflecting on what are the resources that I have in my current structure, first of all, and then how am I going to use those resources creatively to deliver the fundamental model that I'm looking to create. So that's as far as it goes in terms of thinking that through. I think the second really compelling argument is that anything that we invest in terms of early help is investing to save. So if we're looking at investment, we're looking at how we are going to improve outcomes, but also how we're going to reduce care costs and increase value for money options for children and families. So in response to that question, what I'm looking at is an options analysis about the resources that I've got, and also some of the Family Hubs grant that we've been very fortunate to receive, and looking at how best we can create the resources that are going to drive change for families and young people.
Thank you. I have another one. So I've noticed, not within your presentation, but with some of the budget things that are coming up, that you had a project alongside West Northants Council where you were investing something like £700,000 or £800,000 into a care home, which is now more or less in West Northamptonshire, so that money is coming back to you. Will you be using that money towards a new facility, or is that just coming back from, so will you be reinvesting that money?
So, yeah, just some sort of clarity. So the funding that we receive for the investment in care homes or the investment in new provision is of a capital nature. So what we're looking to do by, and to give an example, if we use one of the homes that we're developing without, as there was described earlier, around the sort of the profit margins and the development of a profit empire, the care costs for that young person come down, and that brings down our benchmarking, and that's the way that we can then reinvest that level of service. So if at the more acute end, the trust budget is at a lower level, that allows more funding at the targeted level. So any funding that we receive around property is of a capital nature and is then detailed in both the capital programmes that are delivered by the North and the West. What we are seeing is the DfE have launched a bid for match funding of capital projects. So one of the homes that we built in 2023, the asset was supplied by the council, and that was match funded the DfE. So there's a bid that is going in for both councils to provide the provision that meets the local need, as that was described earlier, with the match funding. So any opportunities that we can do to get additional capital funding, get additional investment in partnership with the councils, that's what we try and do to maximise the level of resources. The outcome of that is lower and better outcomes for the young people in our care.
Thank you. I have one more question, one last question, which was around the SEND early intervention and support. So we were told about open access family support services. Is there any plans in the future looking at those areas? Because one of the things that young families aren't getting is that coming together and that peer support. So peer support around breastfeeding, around vaccinations, which you can get by mother and toddler groups, and that sort of things. Is that something that the family hubs will be taking out across the Yes, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you're describing a more universal offer, so think of an offer that's available to the whole population, then that is the 0 to 19 service that's just been recommissioned. And that is going to work, as Cherise said, hand in glove with the Family Hub offer, and absolutely will have lots of opportunities for support around breastfeeding, etc., as part of that offer. I think what Cherise and I are working on is a really integrated, seamless offer for families. So whether that be a family who doesn't need targeted, specific support, but might need support in other areas, that shouldn't matter. It's about having the right front door.
Thank you very much. So I've got a couple of recommendations, holding recommendations. Financial oversight and placement strategy. Recommend a detailed breakdown of placement costs, which is what you'd said you'd be able to bring to us in the future, especially for care leavers, to ensure value for money and fair cost distribution. Another of the recommendations was the expansion of in-house provision especially around placements and care homes. Recommend that the Council accelerates plans for in-house children's homes and supported accommodation, and we've discussed that this evening. And then send early intervention. So around those three areas. I'd like to say thank you very much for coming, for being open and honest, and slap your wrists over your acronyms again. Which had us scratching our heads a little bit. But thank you so much for coming. Your openness and honesty, as usual. We do appreciate you coming. Obviously, it's not one of your planned meetings with us, but we do thank you for coming and just giving us that insight and update on services. So thank you.
Thank you. And for me, Chair, not to wait for another meeting, would it be okay if I sent that sort of the breakdown of the placements, just so members can see and the movement in the number of children, and that can be then circulated with the minutes? If that's okay with the Chair, I'd be really happy to do that. It's easily available and I could provide that tomorrow.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much for your help and support. We'll let you go now. Thank you very much. And now we come back to your report, Tom, on the KPI sets. Agenda item 5, back on track. If you'd like to take us through your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This paper covers two components, the proposed performance management framework and the proposed KPI set for the upcoming financial year 25-26. I'm going to talk a little bit about the performance management framework and then go on to talk about the KPI set and highlight some of the key changes that are proposed in the set upcoming next year. Performance management is a set of tools and techniques for ensuring we're providing the best services for our residents and communities that we can, in accordance with our plans and goals and objectives that have been agreed through the democratic process. It's a really important tool for good governance and meeting our statutory responsibilities, and helps us to demonstrate that we're achieving best value with taxpayers' money. The performance management framework sets out some standards for how we should approach performance management, including how we should be linking performance indicators to our plans, what constitutes a good key performance indicator or a target or a benchmark, and where we provide reports and how often we provide them. We introduced it for the first time in this financial year, and we've made minimal changes in terms of the proposal for next year. So comments around further improvements we welcome, and will be considered further on to the next step, which is to recommend the take a final version to executive. In terms of the information about the KPI set, then that's a really important part of the framework. These are the most important metrics that the Council will use to measure performance in reports to members. Last year, we introduced a structure which splits out a large number of KPIs into 3 groups. A core set, which contains 43 KPIs in this proposal, which is collected and distributed monthly to all members. That includes information about important areas of council business, such as access to adult social care, homelessness, children missing education, access to children's services, education, health and care plan completion timescales, housing repairs, rates collection, highway defects, street lights in light, and planning application timescales. The second set of KPIs is a service set. There are 86 KPIs in this proposal, and this provides overall oversight of service delivery across council services against the entire corporate plan. This set goes into greater depth about services and includes indicators which are measured less frequently, such as those measured termly, quarterly, or annually. We also have an organisational health set. There are 38 indicators in this set in the proposal, and this is collected and reported quarterly. Indicators here relate to human resources, customer services, governance, finance, and IT. And they're organised into 3 themes: financial, customer, and workforce. Overall, in this set, there's a net change this year of a reduction of 19 KPIs compared to last year. And in general, we're proposing we continue to organise KPIs by corporate priority to ensure that there's a link through to the corporate plan as set out in the framework. I just want to pick out some areas where there's significant change this year. So the government body Offlog was closed quite recently, and we included the indicators that Offlog had selected to be monitored nationally in our previous set to ensure that we had a view of how that new body would view us. Since it has been closed, we've removed them unless there was a specific reason nominated in the review with management teams to keep it. This doesn't mean that the data becomes unavailable. The KPIs were derived from statutory data collections, and in the majority of cases, they've been calculated according to standard definitions, and they are available on the LG Inform website. In adult social care, there have been some changes because the national data set collection changed from a statutory return called the short and long-term data, or SALT, it was shortened to the client-level data set. So we've adjusted some of the calculation methods for the adult social care indicators to reflect this national change. This work has only just concluded, so it's hot off the press, so it's not actually reflected in this paper, but I wanted to flag it to you. It's just meant that 3 indicators have been changed and 1 has been added, and these focus on tracking of demand for long and short-term services and the impact of short-term services. The children's services indicators in this set will be switched in the upcoming year to include information about Northamptonshire children specifically, whereas previously they were covering the whole of the Northamptonshire area. So I think that's a really important step, and that will help us to make sure that the performance that's shown by those indicators is in relation to children and young people in our area, and is not distorted by reflecting the values for children across the county area. And in housing, we have included some of the new tenant satisfaction measures in the overall KPI set. There are 22 tenant satisfaction measures, and 12 of these are collected by annual survey, and these are proposed to go to executive separately in June for discussion, so we haven't included those in the set. We have included 8 of 10 management information tenant satisfaction measures, which primarily focus on compliance and repairs, and there were already some measures which cover tenant satisfaction included in the KPI set around that, and these have been maintained. The full set of indicators will be reported to the Housing Improvement Board additionally. Finally, I haven't included it directly in here, but members of the committee will know that we produce a substantial KPI scorecard report every quarter, which is discussed in this committee and in executive. The format of this report was developed and improved in 2022-23 and has remained broadly similar since. But I know that it's a substantial piece of paper and it's often quite difficult to read. So if there are comments or suggestions for the improvement of this report, particularly to make it more accessible, more readable, more relevant, then this would be welcomed as part of this review. So in terms of the recommendations for the paper, then it would be very welcome to have suggestions and comments about the indicators, the performance management framework, and whether there are any important areas missing for consideration, and then inclusion in the report to executive in April. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Councillor North first, then Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. This may sound like a silly question, but it's absolutely not. But for my first, just two questions. My first question is why now? And the reason I say why now, I appreciate we're heading for a new year, but obviously we've got elections in May. And obviously one of the things I would have thought, hopefully not from my point of view, Chair, you may disagree, but if there is change to some extent, then we could be looking at a new corporate plan. And obviously this is linked to the corporate plan. And if we don't change it in year, why are we not doing this in June? After the election, why are we doing it now? Because there could be a major change to the corporate plan, which could change everything, all the KPIs. So that's I said it might be silly, but from my point of view, it's not. It's a fundamental question. And my other question, which is not so, which I think it's not so serious in that respect, because it's not questioning the whole thing and the timing, is I did go through them and they are quite difficult to see, and I only found one on waste, and I actually thought, and I might have missed it, and I actually thought considering waste is one of the most publicly noticeable things councils do, I would have thought there would have been a bit more monitoring of the waste functions in relation to collection, or this, and obviously we're heading to changes in relation to one of the contracts from the old legacy areas this year as well. So I would have thought, or just questioned, we may have had more monitoring around waste within, and I might have missed them, Chair. So, but I did only find one.
As far as I'm aware, this is an annual thing that we do to look at the KPIs. So this is that timing coming forward. I understand where you're coming from. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You're right in what you've said there, that this is part of our usual governance framework, and each year we commit to doing a review of the performance indicators and then bringing it back. It is integrated alongside the budget, so it's part of that package, if you like. We do have a facility in the performance management framework to be able to change indicators in the year, provided that goes through executive. So if we needed to change them, then we could. The last thing I would say on this point is that many of these indicators are statutorily defined, and we have a long time series for quite a lot of them. So it is likely that even if we were to change the corporate plan, actually many of these indicators would continue to be monitored, because they are core areas of our business, like what proportion of street lights are in light, for example. In terms of waste, I would just need to go through. Thank you for the feedback on making sure that we're adequately covering that area. When I get a moment, I'll have a look at the indicators and just check how many we've got in there. George may want to come.
Okay. Guy first and then George, or George and then Guy?
Chair, I'll be quick. I think Councillor North does make a very good point, and the corporate plan refresh is important. What I would say is obviously, even if a corporate replan refresh is done, it will go through the, I suspect, it will go through the constitutional process. So it would be several months in the making. So those indicators would be very useful guides during that period of time while members consider the strategic direction. I think Tom's made some really relevant points as well about the relevance of the indicators, but I thought I'd just add that point in, but it is good.
George.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you, Councillor North. Appendix B details the service KPIs, obviously, of which there are 86, I think Tom said, and there are a number there listed on page 3 for waste, just to reassure members, including fly tipping, percentage of waste diverted from landfill, household waste sent for reuse and recycling, and how much residual household waste is generated per household, to name but a few. So I think it is adequately covered. I suppose the question is, should it be a KPI, or any of those be a key performance indicator, which is in Appendix A, of which there are far fewer, as opposed to a service indicator, but they are reported and are available for members to see. So it's probably one that we take away, but just to reassure members, there are a number there reported under service KPIs. Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple of little points. First one is that when we measure fly tipping incidents, we refer to those on public land. It annoys the hell out of me that people fly tip on my garden. Several times I've found piles of rubble at the end of my garden that weren't there the day before. They don't get included. But the main thing I was going to raise is that we are trying to assess the quality of life and the service that our community receives. Now, for half of the unitary area, the housing that's provided, the social housing, is provided by social landlords and not by this council. So the KPIs about things like repair rates, voids, etc. only apply to the housing that we own. We don't actually measure any deprivation or unhappiness that's thereby caused for residents who are living in social housing. So I would be interested to know if there is any mechanism or any reporting process that allows us to expand the KPIs for housing in particular that we produce for our own tenants to cover the social landlords' tenants. Because, to be honest, I've had more problems reported by tenants of social landlords than our tenants. And we have an equal responsibility to both. So I'd be interested to hear what the officers have to say on that.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I would have to take the point about the fly tips definition. George may have the detail of exactly what's included in there. Just the point on the housing KPIs. So the tenant satisfaction measures, social landlords also need to report on the same indicators that we have to report on for the new tenant satisfaction measures, and that information will be published. So that information is certainly available, and we can look at how we would make that available to this committee.
Would it be possible to report on that so that we, in particular, can compare it and see trends? Because, as I said, I've had more reports of problems from tenants in social landlords than our tenants. We do better, in my opinion, than the social landlords who co-occupy this area.
And maybe one of those is around the benchmarking of some of those tenant satisfaction measures. They're usually quite readily available. Benchmarking. So how is, I know you said about near neighbours being used to enhance the benchmarking. does that get reported to us on how we're doing against our near neighbours in the report?
Yes, it does, Chair. So where there are benchmarks that are relevant to the particular indicators, then they're on one of the rows in the scorecard. So they will be available. We use the most available and most up-to-date benchmark in there. Sometimes they trail slightly behind the information that we were able to access from our own systems, because we have to get it when the information is published publicly from the statutory data collections.
Is there any way to have a benchmarking specific report? Would people find that beneficial rather than looking through some of the indicators to find that? But
yeah, that's absolutely possible, Chair. There are a range of useful services such as LG Inform, which is a online data store of information about the performance of all of the councils in the country, which provides a really useful benchmarking resource, and we could bring a report to this committee setting out the position of North Northamptonshire Council compared to similar authorities.
thank you. Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. I think Tom mentioned about any suggestions, and I've raised this quite a few times before, not in relation to, let's say, suggestions, but, you know, I do find it interesting that Oflog has just been scrapped just like that, but in relation to, very interesting, but in relation to what has been said about our statutory reporting, which is the thing I've questioned before here, it's not always easy to understand which ones are the statutory KPIs that we have to report into wherever a government, or unless I missed the key, and which ones are ours linked to our corporate plan and our vision and objectives. And in the future, whether it's colour-coded or what have you, it would just be interesting to know which ones are ours that we are actually doing linked to our corporate plan and values, and which one are just statutory returns to wherever and whatever happens to them. And the concern I have about those, Chair, is, you know, whatever happens to those data sets now, which, you know, goes off to different departments. So it is interesting that Oflog that's supposed to be supporting local government has just been scrapped. And yes. I'll use the word scrapped.
I would say something about bonfire, but it's not that time of year. I get it. So Councillor North has made quite a good suggestion in terms of what are our and what are statutory. So what ones will we be using for our corporate plans, and which are statutory would be identification.
Thank you, Chair. So in the scorecard, and I appreciate that's why I asked that question about it's difficult to read. There's a lot of information on there. We have indicated which indicators are where we're using statutory definitions and methods for calculating them. I suppose one of the things I would say is that all of these indicators are our indicators in a sense that they're all important and relevant to our plan, and they've been reviewed and discussed and chosen by our management teams as being relevant to the priorities of those services. The other thing I would suggest, which may assist, is that in terms of bringing the benchmarking report, then those benchmarking reports use standardly defined and calculated indicators in order to provide a fair comparison between the different councils. And so that probably represents well the set of indicators which, if you wanted to say they were the statutory ones, but we don't have an overarching framework of statutory indicators like we used to have with best value performance indicators or national indicators anymore. But that isn't to say that we don't still use some very similar definitions in terms of maintaining time series for those.
Thank you. In terms of the 20 new KPIs, do you think they adequately reflect priority areas for improvement?
all of these KPIs have been reviewed by the management teams, and then there's obviously a process of checking and developing these KPIs and consulting further with this committee and then with the executive. So they should be quite finely tuned to the priorities and service plans of those management teams and within the committees that we're consulting with.
Thank you very much. The other thing that we discussed last year was about the robustness of the data, and you had a methodology developed for testing that robustness. Is that an ongoing process? I noticed that it says that the individual departments have or are using their own methods to test the robustness, but overall, overarchingly, you know, how are we ensuring that, you know, there are those measures and balances?
Data quality and making sure that we've got integrity in the way that we calculate these indicators is really, really important. We are audited by internal audit who do a dip sample of the indicators in the framework and then track those indicators all the way back to where's the information in the source data system and make sure that the calculation has some integrity in terms of coming up with the eventual performance indicator, which is usually a transform number, and it's a percentage of something rather than just a count. The other thing I would say about data quality is that we have several major line of business and case management system replacement projects underway at the moment. We have just launched new systems in revenues and benefits, in customer relationship management, and we're working on a new system in education, and actually the list goes on. It's really, really important in the implementation of those systems to make sure that the system is fit for purpose and closely and adequately reflects the workflow and processes which are used within the services, and that's what means we have good data in the first place when those systems are the right systems for the service and the way that it's delivered. So that's a real focus of those projects, and the performance team is closely involved in supporting those to make sure that we have the right data in the systems.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much. You mentioned you have dip checks on some of the data. I was just wondering, first of all, have those dip checks uncovered anything untoward up until now, or anything major that perhaps we should be aware of? And secondly, what is the process if they do find something untoward, and how is that? That's £10, isn't it? Yeah, what's the process in monitoring any kind of resolution to those problems?
So we haven't, in the audit that was undertaken most recently, there weren't any substantial risks which were identified by that audit. There were one or two cases where the performance indicator was calculated by taking a snapshot of data at the time, but then that spreadsheet was overwritten in the administration process of that workflow. So then when we tried to reconcile and recreate that figure from that date, we couldn't, because we didn't have the evidence in the past. So when those kinds of, so that was an example. We weren't saying the numbers were wrong or that the calculation method was lacked integrity. We were just saying we don't have the kind of historical capability that we would usually expect to have for those indicators. When that was identified, then the corporate performance team went and worked with the business support team and colleagues within those services in order to design a better way of maintaining that information within the workflow of the process they were using, so that we would have some historical record and ability to reconcile. Was there another half to your question? Sorry if I've missed it.
Thank you. How effectively do the organisational health KPIs capture workforce stability and financial stability?
So I think the workforce KPIs are quite a familiar set, which are measuring some of the key aspects of workforce for the organisation. So they will measure things like turnover, sickness leave, those kinds of things, which are common figures which are used in this context. In terms of workforce stability, then turnover is probably the most important indicator. That's telling us how many people are leaving as a percentage of how many people we have in the organisation. For the financial stability, then we have a few financial indicators which are pointing in the direction of finances. Usually they're about the administration of finance in the performance reports, but then alongside the performance reports reported quarterly to executive, we also have the financial reports, which I would suggest are the best place to go in terms of understanding the financial stability of the organisation. I'm sure my colleagues would agree next to me.
David.
Thank you. Just to add to what Tom has said there, I think there is as well a number of different audit activities which we carry out within our own services to understand potential risk areas. So I commission from internal audit a number of internal audits around the control environment that we've got for example, client contributions towards their adult social care support costs. There are a number of different areas where we will carry out routine checks either through internal audit or through our own case file auditing as well. So my managers, particularly around practice and adherence to practice and making sure that we're meeting our statutory requirements, carry out monthly case file audits. So everyone in a supervisory role carries those out.
I've got... Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I should have mentioned and drawn attention to exactly that point that David's just made in the performance management framework. That it's important we don't think that KPIs are the be-all and end-all of how we understand performance and how we are transparent and accountable for performance across the council. Audit, inspection reports, and other activities in terms of quality assurance are all really, really important aspects of understanding performance, then should be taken in the round with indicators.
Thank you. And one of the things that I've got in the proposed holding recommendations is around data transparency and accessibility. And it's about that trend analysis and having that visual that you can see sort of some of those trends coming through. And I don't know how best to see that, because sometimes it gets lost in the visuals, as it were. You're so busy trying to find out what the visuals mean that you lose some of the interpretation, and especially around that trend analysis. So anything that can make that a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to understand would be really important for me anyway. Yep.
Thanks for that feedback, Chair. You will have seen in the scorecards, excuse me, there's a small chart for our indicators showing history. Some of those, I think, get very, very small, and the lines are distinguished by it being a triangle or a square. And that is potentially quite difficult to see. So I do think there's some space for simplifying that. The risk with simplifying is that then it gets harder to show the length of time in terms of trend. So, for example, if we were looking at an indicator which was particularly seasonal, so changed a lot in the winter compared to the summer, we would want to see last year's in order to be able to see whether a change that we're seeing in this year is actually following the same pattern as we saw last year, and then that brings all of those issues alongside it. But we can have a look at how we might simplify that further.
Thank you very much. And then the last proposed holding recommendation on that is the organisational health KPI is incorporated additional metrics on staff satisfaction and retention to monitor workforce stability. Is that something that is easy to incorporate?
Yes, I'm not sure easy. We'd need to collect the data about staff satisfaction and make sure that we were picking on the correct metric. I think there is some work looking at how we could do that. So if we're collecting the data, we can then include the indicator.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, just to build up just to build on what Tom said. So we have recently taken a colleague survey, and the results of those are due to be published soon. And then what we're going to do is that's going to be an annual survey, so that we can start to track progress in terms of colleague satisfaction. We're also going to introduce a bi-monthly or every 2 months pulse survey where we ask 1 or 2 questions of the staff on specific topics, just to sort of temperature check, certain elements of activity or the culture of the organisation as well. So there's probably, as that evolves and develops, we can factor that into future reporting, I would suggest. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And that brings this report to an end. All I would like to say is I am so impressed with some of the data collection and reporting that's done, not just by Tom and his team, but obviously everybody throughout the organisation, because it's a one council thing. But thank you very much for your reports. I'm very much in favour of data collection, robustness of data, and I think that it's one area of the council that, it is, for me, and I love data, I love looking at data. Don't like some of the infographics, but I sometimes get bogged down with those. But finding out, satisfaction measures, how organisations are doing, and trend analysis are all really important parts, as well as obviously our finance team. So thank you very much for a very informative report, for bringing it, and hopefully we've given you some sort of indicators to go on. So thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll pass on your kind words to the team. I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
Thank you. Moving swiftly on, Scrutiny Work Plan for the Corporate Scrutiny Committee. Number 6, is this you, Louise or Chris? Sorry?
It's me, Chair. Chair, it's me. That'll be me, Chair. So, on the forward plan, following May 2025, we have a few things scheduled for discussion and agreement by the Scrutiny Management Board. That includes procurement, customer services delivery update, and the ICT Value for Money Scrutiny Review Panel. I believe Guy was going to come in on the ICT Scrutiny Review Panel, so I'll just hand over to him.
Through you, Chair, if I may. And I'm going to start by stating the obvious. Obviously, it's a member panel, and I'm an officer. So what I'm going to do, I wouldn't want to talk for members, but what I can do is reflect back the conversations that members had in order to give the committee members an update. So if I may, Chair, just to give you a quick overview, a member panel met on Thursday the 30th of January, and that was in addition to 3 previous meetings that were held in 2023, although the majority of the panel members were new when they met on the 30th of January. And given the considerable time and the new members, that obviously presented a little bit of a challenge, picking up a body of work after that delay, particularly in an area as complicated as the IT arrangements. So no easy feat. What members did do is they took stock of the current position in terms of the review and the data that we had, the progress that had been made. They discussed the scope of the review. They looked at some updated comparative data around the number of staff, the cost of the service, the performance of the service. They noted the complexity, but particularly, and I think this is an important point, the speed of travel of the service. And I think my colleague Tom gave some examples of some of the systems that have gone in. But I think the problem that the Task and Finish group has noted in the meeting and has come across is the IT service is developing so fast in terms of the arrangements that the work that was done 18 months ago is kind of out of date. So they felt they almost need to hit the reset switch and refresh the information, which that information was presented, but getting your head around it was quite difficult. And I think members noted that it is moving fairly quickly. To give you an example of that, the council's come so far, it's become much more self-sufficient in its IT. So you may remember the scope originally was looking at the services and the value for money for those IT services provided by West Northamptonshire Council, and also looking at those services provided by North Northamptonshire Council. And what's been happening is North Northamptonshire Council has been taking over more of those services and providing them more of them themselves, and is actually on a trajectory within about 18 months to be fully self-sufficient in the provision of its services. So members were sort of digesting that information and understanding what that meant in terms of how they proceeded. I think what that culminated in, Chair, and I was thinking of the best way of describing this, and obviously this is subject to the steer from this committee chair, but the chair of the member panel has put forward 3 scenarios. So there's a Scrutiny Management Board meeting, which my colleague Raj has mentioned, on the 27th of February. And scenario 1 would be that the panel could squeeze another panel meeting before then, review some additional information, particularly around contracts and around the cost of service, which they requested. And if they're able to get that additional meeting in and they're happy with that information, they may be able to present a report back to Scrutiny Management, or consider a report to Scrutiny Management Board. I'll point out the obvious that the next meeting is on the 27th, so that is quite tight, but it is achievable, but it's very tight, and it's probably more availability of diaries, I would suggest, more than anything, and the meeting of minds, of course. Scenario 2 would be that the panel meet, they consider the information, and they don't feel that information allows them to draw a conclusion, which they very well may do, given the volume of information, which would still culminate in a report to the Scrutiny Management Board. And then scenario 3 would be they can't hold another meeting of the panel, but again, could consider a report at the Scrutiny Management Board. And scenario 1 would allow them to actually consider a report summarising the value for money of the service. Scenario 2 and 3 would be a report that takes stock of how far they've got, what actions might be needed to conclude that review, and also give the opportunity to look at the scope and ask the question, is it too ambitious, is it too relevant, and does it need to be focused in a bit more detail? Chair, sorry, there was no easier way of explaining that. As I say, it's a complex area, but I'm happy to provide any further clarification. But what I would say is over the course of the time, members have looked at a lot of information and got into quite a lot of detail, but it does seem that it is complex and fast-moving, which is and there's not a huge amount. We just had a chat about the comparative data. Interesting enough, there's not a huge amount of comparative data that you can compare like for like with IT. Councils seem to do it very different, and that's presented a bit of a challenge as well. Chair, thank you.
And thank you very much for that explanation of where we are up to at the moment, and obviously we'll be involved in that meeting on the 27th, so I don't think we have many more committee meetings left this forthcoming year. However, one of the things that dropped off the work plan was looking at the reports from the Ombudsman Service, which we haven't done this year. It was due to come back for this meeting, but hasn't, so it's dropped off. Can we record that somewhere that we need to have that information, although we won't be able to take it to a meeting?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. I can add that to the list of items to be scheduled and discussed by the Scrutiny Management Board.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Have I given all the recommendations that I should have? I asked this. I think we have done the recommendations. So, thank you all very much for coming. I would like to close this meeting. Thank you very much for your... did you want to speak, Councillor North? Okay. So, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your input. I hope I'm near or nearabouts somewhere next year. But if not, thank you, team, for all that you've achieved this year.